I am so excited to be here with Trudi Lebron. She is a friend of Selena So, and all friends of Selena So are my friends. So welcome, my friend Trudi.
Thank you so much for having me.
I see you have a red background. Do you like red too, like I do?
So I think the lighting is a little off. It's really pink. Yeah, it's like a deep kind of fuchsia, maybe color.
Okay.
It is my favorite color.
But it does count because it's close to red.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are in the middle of remodeling, or redesigning the office and studio right next door. So yeah, we are painting and all kinds of things.
Good. Feels like similar to me. I'm in my new office in Reykjavik, Iceland, and you might hear a little echo here because I have not figured out how to reduce the echo yet. Working on it. But Trudi, I love what you do. And before I hit the record button, we were talking about how this is also a topic dear to my heart, but maybe hard for me as a Icelandic European woman to know how to, approach this topic. So I'm glad you are here on the show to tell us more about it. So anti-racism, probably this was not your topic since you were born. Like you have somehow come to this topic. You have somehow decided that this is a part of what you do. You also help people, in leadership and building a business. So how did the anti-racism topic, like how did you decide to make this yours?
Yeah. In some weird way, it has been my work almost my whole life. So I grew up in the United States, on the East Coast in the United States, in the 80s. And in the 80s, in the community that I grew up in, there were not a whole lot of biracial families. And I am biracial. My mom is white and my father is Afro-Latino. So he is a Black Latino Puerto Rican man. And so I always grew up, from as young as I can remember, with a very heightened sense of race and identity and fitting in and belongingness. Those were things that were, our themes throughout my entire life. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a singer when I grew up. You know what I mean? I wanted to be.
I like it.
That's what I wanted to be. But, like the way my career unfolded, I worked for a long time in nonprofits, in youth development, working with students who were, struggling students like me, kids who grew up in the same kind of environment that I grew up in. I was also a teen parent. So, I've dealt with a lot of things in my life that had to do with fitting in and access and trying to get your life to be better and, all of those kinds of things. So these are themes through my whole life. And when I was working in the nonprofit industry and realizing that I wasn't going to make enough money in that field to live the kind of life that I wanted, and I started to as many people do, listen to podcasts and explore, online space and what it takes to start like a side hustle. I really fell in love with the world of coaching and personal development, professional development. And that world was so white. There's just no other way to say it. And the conversations that I had been having in my career, in the nonprofit and education industry, really facing inequity and race and diversity head on for, I started doing that work professionally in 2008. So when I started kind of exploring the coaching industry, I was like, how is this field this entire industry has not even started to scratch the surface with this conversation. And so, so it just like with many entrepreneurs, I had an expertise. I saw a gap that needed to be filled. To me, it was a really important, not just a business opportunity, but a social and a moral opportunity to help people, build better businesses and serve more people. So that's how I found myself here.
My why comes also in terms of equality. Now, obviously being raised in Iceland, we don't have a lot of colored people, but I saw the inequality, that women felt they couldn't make their dreams come true because they got married and had kids. So that kind of inspired me, 16 years old. Yeah. Did anything happen? I know, yes, you say you were raised in a community and you this was always a topic, but was it anything specific where you said, I'm going to make this my mission, this is my why?
I think part of it was that I had a lot of experiences as a teen parent, where the world was sending me really strong messages about my life. And those were, that I was a failure, that I was going to be poor forever, that I was going to all of these really harsh narratives. And I started to, thankfully I was really stubborn and I didn't believe any of that, but it encouraged me that when I got to college to study psychology, I have a master's degree in psychology. I specialized in public administration and social change. I am a PhD candidate. So I spent a lot of time understanding how the environments that we're in shape people's lives, and shape the way that we interpret ourselves, like our own identities, and experience, the world and the communities around us. And because of that, like how that then impacts like what we're able to achieve. And the coaching industry, the coaching, personal development, that world is inherently designed to help people transform. So it was almost like what I was seeing was that there was this entire industry whose core purpose is to help people live better lives, but it didn't have this content knowledge, like this body of knowledge about how race and diversity impact the outcomes that people were having. Mm-hmm. And so it just made so much sense to me that if the coaching industry could fix this and address this, that we could collectively serve more people, that not only serve more people, but particularly serve more people of color, more Black and brown folks, to help them, have better outcomes, better businesses, whether, people get involved in coaching for all kinds of reasons, whether they're starting a new business or want a healthier relationship with themselves or other people. So that's what it was. Really it wasn't really a moment. It was more of a collective experience of my life.
Yeah. But you also had this, feeling like I'm not going to accept society's view of me. Right. And I'm going to do something about it, exactly. which feels very dear to my heart too. Right. So you had already started all of this before last year, obviously.
Yes, yeah, very much.
How did last year change you and your business? Like, what did it feel like when you saw, oh, it seems like everybody's waking up, like the whole world suddenly realizes the problem that has been around for 400 years or more?
Yeah, it felt like people finally showed up to the party that I had been trying to throw for like a very long time. Like seriously, I launched my first online course. I had been doing like one-to-one coaching and small group coaching and a ton of consulting for years. But I launched my first course, I think it was May of 2018. And that course was called Diversity and Equity for Coaches. I am almost certain that it was the first course of its kind at the time, which is, funny because now there's so many, which is great. That means the demand is there. But when I launched that course, it was not that it was hard to get people to come, but it was very, it was so new to people. It was like, I was trying to, it wasn't just that I was teaching the content. It was that I was even the phase before that, just trying to help people understand why it was important that they learn it. And so I spent a lot of time, in that awareness building and education building and relationship building before I could even just start teaching people what they needed to know and coaching them to do things a little bit differently. So last year when, I mean, and for the last couple of years, we've had successful programs and, we've had a multiple six-figure business for a while. But last year when it was like 600 people were on the workshop that I hosted on a Sunday afternoon that I put together in 24 hours, that's when I knew something had shifted. And it felt really, there's this tension, right? Because it felt really wonderful. And at the same time, it was so sad that it took, it was a combination of like the murder of George Floyd, the amplification of Black Lives Matter, also that people were home in front of their computers for coronavirus. Like it was almost like this blend of multiple crises happening at once. And so it was, there's a lot of mixed emotions. It was it was very heavy emotionally. And also I was like, finally, maybe we can get some stuff done now,
I got goosebumps as you were explaining how this happened. Like, it's wonderful that people finally wake up to something they need to learn and know about, but it's sad that it took so much to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But that's when people started to hear your name, and I definitely heard your name last year, and I'm glad we are finally doing this episode. But what can people, like most of my listeners are based in Europe. Yeah. Most of them, I assume, are white. And I know from my clients last year when I spoke up about Black Lives Matter myself, that, not everyone was ready to do it. I said, you have to mix your values with your business. You cannot have separated. It's not possible. It's something that I learned starting a business or running a business 16, 17 years ago, that you wouldn't do it. And I can see that was the old way.
Yes, for sure.
That's no longer the way. And we seem to agree on this. But what do you say to someone who has these thoughts? Like, I'm not going to mix this.
Yeah. So, I try to, I try to stay out of the business of convincing people, right, what they should do. Our clients, our audience members are people who have come to the conclusion because of, how they were raised, what how they feel, what their values are, that they've come to the conclusion that like, I can't do business that way. I need another way. And they come and, they find me and my team and we help them. Your people, we are one everybody is one person. You can't separate your business. Well, not that you can't, but I don't think that you should separate your business from your values and from your commitments. I think that way of doing business is one of the reasons that we've perpetuated things like pay inequity, for example. It's one of the reasons that we see disparities in the way that people have, in the way that people have outcomes in their life, because of the access that they have to opportunities. Like if we're not we have to understand, like we have been taught business from a system that is really about amassing large amounts of power and money and control, right? And if we just take those skills, that's what we're doing. We're just replicating these unhealthy patterns that are about, control of resources. And that's not gonna lead us to a world that is healed, where people can have healthy relationships, where we can help people have better lives, make sure that people are making the money that they need to make to support themselves and their families. So I think we're seeing more and more that you said before we started, it's one world, right? Like we are all here together in one world. We can talk about different countries and languages and states and all of these things, but at the end of the day, we're all in this together. And I think many people are starting to see that. And our businesses have to be a reflection of the world that we want to build. And what we're seeing is that more consumers, whether it's a client or a customer, like a product that you sell, or, someone who's purchasing a service that you're going to provide or a support that you're going to offer them, that consumers are making more purchasing decisions based on their values. So they want to do business with people who share values with them. So business owners are going to have to adjust. I think that that's what we're going to see. So it's more of a call to action and aspiration. Like, if can we get more people to do business in a way that's anchored in their values, anchored in creating, healthier communities, healthier world, better relationships. I think that's the way to create change.
Yeah. I saw a lot of big companies in the US speak up, which was refreshing, whereas before, anytime something happened, they wouldn't say anything. And suddenly I'm getting all these emails from the CEO. The CEO is writing, and
Right.
there's these statement emails. And
Yep.
This didn't really spill over to Europe as much as I would have expected. But I hope this is a lasting change, that businesses have to take a stand.
Yeah, I hope so. And again, I think that if more consumers, and if we continue to see this trend of consumers wanting to do business with companies that are taking a strong stand and whose values are aligned with them, I think more companies are going to be forced into that. I don't want people to do things because they're forced into it. I want people to do things because it's the right thing to do. So, what we do is, like, we help people scale businesses in a way that is equitable, inclusive, justice oriented, diverse, how our clients are like trying to build diverse teams and improve retention, and, and make sure that their values are really coming through. And I think that I want people to do that before there's a crisis or there's a problem, because
Yes.
we do help people with that too, but it's the work is harder and longer.
Yeah. It's interesting when you say wanting to do a business with companies that have values that are aligned with yours.
Yeah.
I did switch a few systems last year because of that. Exactly. I was not aligned with the values. So we switched email system, we switched teaching platform, switched the landing page tool. It was all based on the values. Maybe there were some other things that I was unhappy about before, but the ultimate pulling the plug was the value discussion.
Yeah. We're in the same place right now. We're, changing some of the systems that we use, and we have been looking to do business, like kind of doing research on some of the companies that we're thinking about moving to. Even, it's those things seem obvious when we're talking about like a coach or a service provider, but it's really, when we're talking about like a technical service, like some applications that we're going to use. Sometimes people don't think of it when it comes to that, but we're really looking at every part of our business and where all of our money goes, and really, to the extent possible, making sure that it's going to companies where there is alignment. And not that we have to agree on every single thing, right? Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that they take a super explicit stand in the way that, my company does, but, this is what we do professionally. What we're looking for sure is at least red flags. Like, we don't want to do business with people who aren't saying anything. People don't have to have it perfect, but they need to be aware and making an attempt to, communicate where they stand on things.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a bit like, the movement probably a decade ago to sustainability. And,
sure.
You go on a company website and you see, are they doing something about that? So this becomes just a part of the mission statement of each company.
Exactly.
But you mentioned a diversity in teams, and this is a bit harder in some countries than others. How do we approach this in Europe? What do you think we should do where diversity in my clients, diversity in teams is harder to achieve because, it's just not as many colored people in this area?
Yeah. So people of color, having people of color, Black and brown folks in your community isn't the only way to achieve diversity. So I think that is a common misunderstanding. I think it's important, but we have this, me and my team have this question, this conversation all the time, because there are places in the United States where it's still majority white people living in communities. And so if you own a store and your employees are coming to work, like, what do you do? And it's not, diversity is more, that's why we always talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because diversity is just about like differences. So you can have diversity in age, you can have diversity in perspective, obviously diversity in race and ethnicity, which is what most people think, but there's a lot of ways to make sure that you have diverse perspectives in your workplace or in your community. Also, thinking about how are people included? What is the experience of the people when they come into your space? And that is, I always give this analogy of putting an elevator into your business. If you go into a commercial building, if you're going to build a commercial building and it's going to be more than a floor, you have to put an elevator in. And in most places, that's a legal requirement in order for you to be compliant, ADA compliant. And the purpose is so that people who cannot walk up and down stairs can get upstairs, but everyone takes the elevator. Having the elevator improves the experience for everyone who comes into the building for the most part, right? So even if you are a company that is, again, maybe for whatever reason, you are mostly white and you are in mostly a white community, there are still things that you need to be looking at to make sure that it is inclusive and that it's equitable for people who are showing up. So it's much more than just like, let's create, more diversity. Let's have Black and brown folks come and join us at our workplace. It's deeper than that.
Yeah. And that's good, because I think that's the common misperception, that if you cannot do a conference or have pictures of your team and people like, there's no diversity on the team, because they don't see, what's behind the face, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Right. And, that's not to give people a pass and say that you shouldn't try to achieve racial diversity. You should. And there are things that you can do. To most places, even if there are very few people of color, most places have some people who are not, who are, whether they're indigenous to the place where you live, or, different, just different kinds of immigrants, people, language diversity, there's a whole lot of ways, again, that people can be diverse. Yeah. So it's not that you shouldn't attempt that. There are things that you can do to make your company more attractive, to recruit diversity, to create a safe space for people so that they can show up and not be discriminated against and not have to deal with microaggressions. So I don't want to give people a pass and just be like, no, it's okay if your summit is all white or your conference is all white. I'm not saying that's okay. What I'm saying is that that's not it. Like, that's not the extent of how we measure diversity, equity, and inclusion.
But how do we really bring forward, the anti-racism discussion overall in the coaching industry? Like, what do you propose?
I mean, what I think is that people really need to start with a personal journey around what your understanding is about racism, about discrimination, about, patriarchy, misogyny, all of the ways that people have been oppressed over time. Like, really start to understand that, start to understand how, what you've learned about roles, about power, start to unpack your identity. Like, what does it mean to be whatever identity you are, whether you're a white person, a Latino person, Indian, like wherever you are from, start to unpack, what have I learned about my identity? What have I learned about other people's identity? Where do those biases start to come in my life? Start to look at your business. What do you only have white clients? Look at your podcast, your podcast feed. Are all the podcasts that you subscribe to just a whole lot of white folks? Like, why is that? You can create, you need to, and start diversifying there. Start listening to people, teachers and mentors who come from a variety of backgrounds, start to understand the broader conversations. And that's before you start to do anything in your business, is start
Yeah.
to just start to learn like why we have the world that we have and the conditions that we have, and come to a personal conclusion around like, what are your values? What are you committed to? Is this something that you can take on in your business? And then you can start to look at, all right, what are our policies? What are our job descriptions? What can we do differently? But until you have done that personal journey, you're not even ready to start swapping out pictures on your website, for example.
Yes. So how do people approach this journey? Do you say you sit down and start to write a journal on this, or what do you propose?
I mean, a lot of people do it in a lot of different ways. Some people do start a journal. Some people read a bunch of books and join a book club and start to have conversations there. We have a lot of people join our membership program. It's called the Equity Centered Coaching Collective. And each month we publish a learning journey for people to go on that kind of intersects the personal journey and the business work. So, find a mentor that resonates with you, and start to learn from them.
And how do we approach, like, there is do we all need to, for instance, I have been watching some documentaries about what's happened in the United States, and this is not something you learn in school, right? You're shocked, right? And even just little clips on Facebook about explaining a systemic problem, like you couldn't get a loan, or you are why the schools in certain areas are so much worse than in other areas, like, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so privileged, like, we don't have this, so how do I, maybe that's difficult for you to explain, but I'm like wondering, how do we approach that? Like, should everyone just learn the history of the United States, or do we have to try to dig up, like, what's the history in my country or in my part of the world?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I really would challenge people who are from different countries, particularly European countries, who feel like, oh, like we don't really have that problem, or it's really different. Because from, when I talk to colleagues in the UK, they're like, oh no, this is a problem here. It's just, it's just that people aren't talking about it. So because the culture is more formal, more polite, like, there's just like a different way that people show up in those conversations. So I do say, like, look at the history of colonization, of slavery, of, just like all of power, right? How power has been amassed by people. Like, learn that about your communities. What are the groups that are coming into your communities, your countries, as immigrants? Like, why are those people coming? What's going on? Like that, those are good places to start. What is their experience like as people who are immigrating into a different country? Like, do they think that there's no racism? They probably have another opinion, So you can definitely look at the US, where, we talk about these things way more openly and just kind of like, broadcast them. But then, I think it is important to look at where you live and have a local context for, for how these things are manifesting close by.
I know you said you don't want to be in the convincing business and talk to people but one thing comes to mind as you're saying is that, like, this is hard work. I guess a lot of people will just say, well, I'm not going to go there. Like, why do I need to do all this?
So and this is where I say, like the fact is, like, people don't need to do it, right? Like, but understand that if you don't, that you're just kind of complicit in the system that we have. So not participating in this conversation is 100% a choice that people can make. I don't necessarily understand that choice, but I acknowledge that that is a choice that many people make. I think that if people are feeling a pull towards, like, I want to do something, I want to understand more, I think more people, I don't know, maybe I'm an optimist, but I think that most people do care. I really do think that. I think most people do care.
Yeah.
And if you care, and if you want to be a part of making things better, not that you have to be a hardcore full-time activist, but that you just want to be in better relationships with humans, right? then this is a door to walk through, right? Where you become a part of making someone's experience better. It will also make your life better. We hear that is a consistent like outcome, that when people take this journey, whether they are white folks or people of color who also have their own identity work and unpacking to do, that it changes the way you show up in your whole life. You know, it changes the relationships you have with peers, with colleagues, with your family, how you parent your children, how you run your business. Like it really is transformative work, and you feel more connected to people. You feel more connected to everybody's humanity. Like it just does. It deepens your experience, I think, as a human.
Yeah, I can totally see that. How has the coaching world changed since you started? You said you've been doing this since 2018, and maybe in 2018 people were not ready, but
yeah, I think people are more ready. I think people are seeing the need for it now. Still, a lot of people don't know what to do, and we're working on helping people like learn that. Yeah. But yeah, people are way more open to the conversation. People are seeing the need to be participating in these conversations, be like heightening their awareness, be on their own journey around their identity and what they've created and what they're holding on to, what they're perpetuating. People are thinking about how to do business differently, how to create more access and like impact opportunities for people. So yeah, it is shifting. It's great to see, especially when I get to work with entrepreneurs who have really big businesses. I worked with Hay House Publishing. I'm continuing to work with Brooke Castillo and the Life Coach School. We have some clients who serve thousands of people. And so when we get to work with people who serve that many people, the ripple effect of the work is just explosive. It's massive. We also work with people who have tiny businesses who are like in our mastermind and in our membership. So it's really dynamic. But in 2018, when I ran that course, and the year previous, 2017, when I was doing coaching for business owners and helping them, the conversation was really more about like, how do you use your coaching practice to make a social impact? People weren't really ready for the race part of that conversation. But yeah, so it's great to see how it's evolved over the last couple of years. And I'm looking forward to, like what's to come.
Yeah. I see a big change, and I think I'm glad that this is a part of, like, because I mentioned before, sustainability, like, is something that everyone talks about, and now we can, address this social injustice as well. Yeah. But now we are in Black History Month, and I come back to the question, what can someone in Europe do where we have never heard of this term before? Maybe some people heard it last year, and maybe they heard it the year before, but mainly from American businesses. So everything that comes, like, we are doing Halloween in Iceland because we have Halloween in the United States. So everything spills over. And I wonder, people are very careful. I saw some Facebook posts, and they're careful, like what is applicable, like what are they allowed to do, like what is okay. So I wonder if you can give some tips on that.
Yeah, I think that it's, this is an interesting question about how people in other countries, like do this work. And I would encourage people to really think about, again, their local context. What contributions has the people who come from the diasporic African, community, what contributions have been made that are showing up in your community? I am 100% sure that there are impacts there. And so taking the opportunity to highlight that and to say, look, this is something that we use every day, or this is a building that was designed by this African architect, like, and no one knows that, like, we should know that, and we should be thinking about that, So those are ways to, you don't have to just like talk about what's happening in like the United States civil rights movement. Like, you have history from your own country that should be explored. And so I think that's like just immersing yourself in learning that, I think, is a great way to spend that time. Because this work it's not about, like, you know, Black History Month or any of this work. It's not about an Instagram feed or, you know, showing the world that you're cool and that you get it, right? That's not what it's about. It's about how you let it change you and how you come and how you share that learning. So taking the time to, if you're not aware, taking the time to do some learning is probably a great place to start.
Yeah. But it also sounds like something that is ongoing and probably a journey almost forever. Like you're not finished at some point.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think that, like, you know, that we have that conversation all the time about like how Black History Month is, you know, it shouldn't just be a month. It should be something that's incorporated into curriculum in school all year round. You know, it shouldn't be, you know, Black history is American history. It's not a separate thing. So, you know, if people want to use the month as a catalyst to begin the work because you're paying attention to it in a different way, that's great. But, you know, it should be something that, you know, if it's a commitment, it's a commitment. It's something that you should always be, you know, thinking about and learning about.
I think there's a lot of parallels to, you know, gender equality discussion and the anti-racism discussion. Like it's an ongoing, it's a never ending, you know, project. And if we don't know what to do, maybe if we take it to some subject that we know better, we would know what to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So what's next for you?
Oh man. Well, once we get these 2 rooms finished, we'll be working on some YouTube stuff, which we're really excited about, continuing to podcast, of course. We're actually going to be rolling out some new programs that are really designed to teach more about how to coach, because we do a lot of business development. And our work so far has been a lot about helping people build business that are equitable and inclusive. But we are putting together some plans to talk about the skill of coaching. Like, how do you be a coach that is inclusive and equitable? So that's kind of like the next thing that we're putting together, you know, to roll out later this year. So those are, you know, and who knows what else.
Who knows what else? Trudi, it's been really so much joy and informative to have this chat together. And I'm excited to hear what my listeners say. So please tag me and Trudi on Instagram and let us know what you think about this episode. And we'll link up in the show notes your programs and your website so people can go and find Trudi and learn more from her. Thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you. Bye.